Be sure to subscribe and like our channel. You know, every week we listen to music from the Luminous Zach, who actually, who gave us that music like 10 years ago now. When you think about
Still
it,
kicking.
10 years.
Still kicking.
In different forms. But now we're still, as we say every week, going back to our roots, looking for ways to get back on live radio to not just be a podcast, but live radio. Why? Because the truth comes out in live radio. That's why we actually do YouTube live at the same time, because stuff has been said on the show that would never be said in pre-processed stuff, and people who they wanted to hate came on the show and showed vulnerability, and they're like, oh, I can't hate that person. So that's why we do live. It's more authentic. And if, like we were joking before the show, if somebody has to go to the bathroom, you even get that. It's real when people have to go to the bathroom. I mean, that's kind of funny, but it's kind of true.
It is true. People gotta go, they gotta go.
Right? Exactly. So what do we got going on at the Queen City Curio? In case you're wondering, where are we broadcasting from, Zach?
We're broadcasting from 607 Gerard Street East, Unit 401, 402. We got the whole floor mostly. Most of the floor is ours, you'll see. And with that, what we got coming up, we have your tarot workshop tomorrow, sir, talking about divinations. That's still a tarot series for anyone that like to become a sponsor. You have access to all that, plus 3 years of content, depending on your sponsor level. We have multiple tiers. Then we also have the luck Buddha attunements or change your luck attunements, where we will be doing through January. It's actually on Sundays also for the whole month of January. Buddha rituals of luck to improve your luck through the year. And then we also have...
I don't know. Yesterday, last week, you almost got possessed.
Buddha gonna do what the Buddha gonna do. Bald head, Chinese dude. I don't have the belly yet, but maybe.
I mean, you were pretty close. Like,
I was on the line. It was
pretty intense. So
it was pretty intense, especially going through all those realms. I was like, I'm gonna get to the next realm. There ain't no holding me back. All the beings of the realms gonna get some luck.
And then what do we have going on the 27th?
Well, we have your famous Massa Chaos Baphomet.
It's not my Massa Chaos. He's Carol's Massa Chaos, but that's okay.
It's yours when you're doing it.
I guess so. Yeah, it is mine. So yes, lots of stuff. If you want to, you can come watch the show live. We'll put the big screen television on, and we'll put the sound on, and you can kind of watch it on our screen live while we're kind of doing the show, and kind of ask questions if you come here in person. So, that's the deal. Come in person. You can kind of see these, ask questions. You'd be like an audience participation, and we totally encourage it. So, maybe not spam me, but you maybe not hammer people when the presenters when they're here, but you can ask questions, which otherwise you couldn't do on a podcast.
That you can.
So today we're talking to fellow Canadian. Usually it's always U.S. people we have on the show, but today it's a fellow Canadian.
So they dropped down the A's.
You can. I'm a transplant. I have not earned the right to drop the A's. But we had Azariel Flame. I was on his podcast now a couple months ago, more than a couple months ago. And I had a great time. And I said, hey, why don't you come on our podcast? You're kind of doing some interesting stuff in Alberta. And I know it seems weird. We're talking about an occult store in Alberta. For those of you in Canada, which, I mean, he's got a funny story about that. But they're really doing a lot of interesting things because his occult store doesn't source a lot of the stuff that's in the store from China, which is a very different thing. They're actually using maker tools. And if you don't know what the maker community is and what maker tools are, we'll talk about that today. So this is kind of a in-house manufacturing where they manufacture almost everything they have themselves. And that's pretty cool. And we said, hey, let's talk about that because that's pretty cool. And the fact
Definitely.
store out in Alberta, which is not, I mean, for the people, all of our U.S. listeners, that's sort of like being in Arkansas or Mississippi or something. It's roughly the same, right? Is that right, Zach?
I mean, yeah, I'd probably say it's like, yeah, your Midwest type of vibe.
North Dakota, then.
Yeah, that's probably closer to it, actually.
All right, very good. So, still, that gives a context of not usual place you'd think of a bastion of cult innovation, as it were. So welcome to the show, Azariel. Sorry. I appreciate you coming on. Like I said, I think it was really cool that a lot of the stuff you make, you're all automated. It's all in-house. Everything's produced right there.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I really wanted to do if I was going to do the occult thing, publicly, is I didn't want to be every other shop that you see. You walk into pretty well any occult shop nowadays, and you're guaranteed that you're going to see that section of the store that every other store has, right? And I didn't want that. And I mean, obviously we still carry your incenses and all of your things like that, they are mass produced, but I also make our own in-house. We have, pretty much everything that we do it doesn't leave without me touching it or us touching it in some way. There's nothing that you'll usually find here that you will find in other stores. And in fact, lots of stores are now starting to pick up stuff from us because of just how unique it is. And we do make custom things for other businesses that, then those businesses, you'll never see their stuff in another shop either. Right. So.
Nice.
It's kind of interesting because we were talking a little bit about the lasers and that's what I mentioned in the preambles. Like, you're using a lot of maker tools, which involve industrial lasers and involves, cast and die equipment in some cases, probably laser cutting too. So these are all kind of cutting edge tools that people are using to build engineering tools. And it's kind of interesting because you applied that to actually a lot of the stuff you have in the store, like, laser cut stone, laser cut wood burn items that you can then get a lot of precision on, and they look very good.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's kind of probably, there's a lot of traditional, talisman makers and stuff that are going to be like, oh, that's not going to fucking work. But, honestly, sorry, can I swear on this show? I guess I should have asked that.
You absolutely can.
So until we get back on actual radio, the answer is yes. Once we get back on actual radio, then the answer would be like, beep, 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 beep. Right. So a little delay.
But yeah, you can't tell me that, Solomon, if he had the ability to use lasers and CNC machines and water jets and things like that, that he wouldn't be building some pretty badass shit for his temple, right? And he wouldn't need to necessarily have enslaved all of the jinn to do that. So, it's I like taking the old and merging it with the new. Society is moving along, and I believe that the occult and the magical community should move along with it, and we should adapt. I mean, technomancy is very much a real thing in our time now.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and that's kind of an interesting take because that's radically different than a lot of the traditionalists, especially ceremonial traditionalists. And you do have a lot of ceremonial engravings that are, well, quite frankly, we'll put some pictures up there. I'll share the screen. They're pretty awesome. So and if you're watching the video, you'll be able to see some of the work. But they're pretty awesome. I'd buy them. And that said, but it's definitely not traditional. And we should talk about that for a minute, because this is a perspective that, no one's going to say, hey, Andrea, do you think you should do things by the book? Well, I wrote a book on hands-on chaos magic. Obviously, I'm all about let's innovate and make the tools a little easier. But this is a belief that, some people would actually object to. And maybe we could talk about that for a little bit. There would be people who would strongly say that you can't use that stuff because that's not the traditional way it's explicitly laid out in the grimoire systems.
Oh,
and you kind of touched on that a little. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got amazing talisman makers out there that are, they're following it right to, the Key of Solomon letter, and, they're using every bit of, dove's blood that they need, and they're using only a brass stylus hand done on the proper metal in the proper planetary hour and timing. And, they're doing full on invocations with the angel and doing, God form possession with them and stuff. And it's amazing stuff. And I have nothing against that because I did it that way myself a long time. And that's how I got to where I am now. But, I think that taking, like, let's say a laser engraver and running it through a similar ritual as to what you would do with your brass stylus and consecrating it and invoking those angels and having them to imbue their energetic signature into the working machinery of it, I do believe that, that can and does work. And I have a number of clients that would attest to the efficaciousness of the talismans that we do make here. So it's where do you want to draw that line? Where does it become no longer the magician doing the magic and, it's the spirits doing the magic? Where do we draw the line of where the talisman can draw the spirits into? Why can I not draw the energy of Archangel Zadkiel through a laser beam, but I can do it through a brass stylus? What is the metaphysical reasoning behind that? And if we look at things based on, frequencies and stuff like that, I can hit a number of different frequencies with my laser, right? So if I'm hitting the proper frequency, doing the proper amount of passes, my energy is pouring into the machine as I'm using it. It's going through, the entire circuitry of the machine while I'm in possession with that angel. How is that any different than me holding that stylus?
Well, Zach knows, like, I got an iPad Pro for Christmas, and I've been using it
as
as
a beautiful thing.
And I've been using it as a scrying mirror. So you're talking to the choir here. But why isn't it different? If someone has to do these tools in a traditional way without a CNC machine, you're going to spend $1,000 on the talisman. That's out of reach I would be out of reach for many people, I think.
Absolutely. And that's, kind of another thing was when I was hand doing these, we were in that $1,000 ballpark. I put 100 hours or more into crafting a talisman that can only be done at a proper moon phase with the proper planetary timing. And I now have to take 3, 4, 5 months to make this talisman because I can only do it within 2, possibly 3 hours of a day once a month. Well, now you're adding
that's a $5,000 talisman, right?
Yeah, right exactly. There.
Whereas I can, throw it in my machine here, have it cut, cast, dyed, laser engraved, and all done, and I can pop out 3 of them within an hour. Well, now we've gone from a $1,000 or a $5,000 talisman to $50 to $100, and the efficaciousness is very comparable. So,
although I think that the classic traditional talisman makers they would argue that point, the efficacy. But I would argue as a chaos magician that there's probably efficiency versus ultimate power. And once you get past a certain level of efficacy, it no longer matters. As in, most people would get the results they want. I think that's what you meant too.
They're comparable. I wouldn't say that they're equal. And I mean, obviously, we all know, anyone who's made talismans, the more time that you put into it physically, you're holding it, that energy is running through you. You're in possession with, say, Archangel Zadkiel or Archangel Michael. Their energy is pouring through you. The longer that metal is in your hand and that energy is creating a circuit with you and with that tool, the more charged it's going to be, for sure. And I will not argue that point at all. And it's, that's just time, energy, buildup of that frequency. But now you've got that talisman. It's made in less time. But now if you're frequently using that talisman, you're invoking those spirits that are tied to that talisman, and you're putting in hundreds of hours of work with that talisman, I would argue that then that charge is going to increase over time.
Absolutely. Like at that point, you're kind of, I don't want to say democratizing and otherwise elitist kind of magical system, which is ceremonial magic in a lot of cases.
It is.
If you do everything by the book. And then you're basically getting the tools in the people's hands, and they can kind of take it from there. So even if it's not 100% as good as a classical Solomon tool, they still get a lot out of it, and they can do their own invocations to kind of boost it up.
Well,
Absolutely.
and it makes it accessible too. I mean, that is the democratization of this. It's you got something to start with as a battery and going from there.
Absolutely. And, if you look at it, a lot of people get into doing magic and making talismans and things like that because they're coming from a place of poverty and they want to be able to increase their station, right? So now take the worst money magic you've ever done. I guarantee you it's going to make you $5 to $10. So now the next time that you use that magic, if it's going to hold a charge, maybe it makes you $10 or $15. And then the next time you use it, it's going to maybe make you 15 or 20. You're still increasing the profitability of that product by increasing its energetic signature. So if we're looking at it from that perspective as well, you're not going to make $1 million when you buy a $50 talisman, but you might over time.
Right, but you wouldn't make $1 million with paying $1,000 for a talisman either. So
exactly.
I mean, people would argue the point about that one. But I'm with Zach, and I think I'm with you, Azariel, that I don't think you could buy $1,000 talisman, but until you spend the time to actually get it to be attuned to you, it's not really going to produce that kind of magic. I mean, so there's this process that you still have to go and work with the talisman, whether you're getting a machine-based talisman that has the machines blessed or a Solomonic talisman. You're going to have to work with it before it actually. It really completely works with your energy. I mean,
absolutely. And you need to think of it more as a mediating force between you and the actual spiritual, forces that you want to be connecting to. So even though it's a mediator, it's not necessarily going to do everything that it says just sitting there. I know a lot of people that have made Solomonic talismans the traditional way, and then they just let them sit in a cupboard and they don't play with them. And now all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, this Solomonic shit, it's kind of okay. It worked for the first few weeks. Then it just stopped working. And it's like, well, have you talked to them? Like if I'm your buddy and you invite me to your house once a year for Christmas, I'm going to probably drop off a gift at Christmas. And then that's about it.
I mean, that's kind of funny because it's like this that is a notion actually in ceremonial magic from some people that, you could you make it once and then that's it for your whole life. But I mean, what you're describing essentially is the same to me. Like, okay, the tank runs out of gas. Or you haven't talked to somebody who's sitting in the corner for like 3 months and they're like, what, you want money now? Like what?
Relationship management 101.
Exactly, right? If I haven't talked to you in 5 years and you phone me up and you're like, hey, Azariel, I really need to borrow $1,000. I've hit a really, really tough spot, but I promise I'll help you out later when I can afford it. And it's like, okay, well, what have you done for me in the last 5 years? But now if you're my buddy that every Friday night we go to the pub, we have a pint, we sit down and we bullshit and, we decompress. And, I built a deck last summer and you came and you helped me do that. And now you phone me up and you're like, dude, my car broke down. I can't get to work unless I have $1,000 to fix it. I get paid in 2 weeks. I'll fucking pay you back. I'm good for it. I'll see you at the pub on Friday and I'll buy you drinks. Fucking perfect. You got $1,000.
No, I mean, this is actually like getting to obviously in other traditions, you don't have this issue. Like obviously in voodoo, we know goddamn well you cannot let your talismans just sit there. You have to feed them and think about them, and this relationship management's more front and center. And I think from the demonology community, not the classic ceremonial magic way people work with demons, it's also right there. You have to keep the relationship going in some sort of way. And I think that's true in most traditions, actually, that you have to keep the relationship going and you have to kind of keep it going. Otherwise, like it doesn't quite, there's a sort of period of sorry about that, right? Like that life got in the way, and I had to go, and you reconnect with them, and then you ask for $1,000 after you apologize a lot to say, mentally I was screwed in the head, and the spirits are very understanding where you go, well, yeah, it was me, I was screwed in the head, but I really, I just couldn't get my head straight to come to you, and they're more forgiving. But yeah, the attitude that like, hey, just do this with the talisman and that's it. I don't think that like it kind of goes in the same way that as a chaos magician, I know it's wrong. Sure, I'd like to have gold discs for every king goetic spirit. That would be fantastic. Can I get the work to work without that? Yes. Yes, I can. Can I use a CNC machine to engrave a beautiful looking seal or plate? Yes. Will that work? Yes. And then what matters more is exactly what you're talking about. That relationship seems to matter a lot more than the especially after the initial juice of the talisman's gone.
Absolutely. And I mean, people don't realize that even when they're carrying around these talismans, they're actually still engaging with them. So that, some people would argue that, I don't actually call upon the spirits. I don't actually sit down and scry with them in my black mirror. I don't actually, call them up and do stuff. But I would argue that that's not the case in most cases. If you get a Jupiter talisman or a solar talisman or something made for money, and where are you going to put it? You're going to put it in your wallet, or you're going to carry it around in your pocket. And every time that you are putting out a request for money verbally out loud, those spirits are going to still pick up on it, and you're still having a two-way dialogue, whether you realize it or not, right? So
I think it's even more than that, right? Like people openly fondle the talisman when they're thinking about, I need money to pay rent, right? Like, exactly. What is that? Like, that's emotion plus intention, even if it's not a formal summoning, which means the spirit is directly being contacted. I think you're absolutely right about that. You're 100% right that, yeah, at that point, you're activating it by thinking. You have the emotion behind it. You're putting the thought and energy. So what that it's not happening with a black mirror? It's still happening.
Yeah, exactly. And, and we could argue medium and everything else too. People say these have to be made on the proper metal, etc. But if you read the actual texts, what else does it say? Virgin parchment. Well, so if I can write this on any fucking piece of paper and I can charge it in the day and the hour and call on the angel or the demon or whatever is ruling that sphere, and it still works with that piece of paper, now that's where my wheels really got turning with manufacturing and experimenting. Because now if that piece of paper works, why does it necessarily have to be silver for the moon? Why can't I use perhaps a moonstone? Or why can't I use a liminal wood such as birch, which is used in just about every culture in the world as spell paper? The bark is used for, talismanic spell paper. The wood itself has been used for centuries as a talismanic wood. Why can't I now use that? And, then other cultures say that, it's not a lunar wood, it's a mercurial wood. Well, now that's even better, because when can you consecrate every fucking talisman? On a Wednesday in the hour of Mercury. So now we've got a mercurial lunar wood that has the ability to transcend all of them. Why can't I practice and use all the other ones? So I actually went through and made a bunch of different talismans on, tons of different types of woods, and have been playing over the last, couple of years with different mediums. And it's been really eye-opening and surprising that a lot of what we would consider not okay for these projects actually does get results. Is it the same result with all of them? Absolutely not. But some of these materials have yielded better results than I've gotten with the proper metals. So,
people might accuse you of being a chaos magician like they do me. I mean, but that's very interesting. Like, I mean, first of all, there's a couple of interesting things I think you said there. First of all, clearly you're testing the experimentation of these things over and over again. You make it and you're testing it, which if you got a CNC machine, that's a nice privilege to be able to have, right? You can make some other stuff, kind of test it out and see what you're doing. So, I mean, I think that's pretty interesting in itself. Like, because that's not that's not just that you just print them on whatever. You're actually testing the materials to see, what's working, what's not. Clearly, you mentioned birch, so I think that's one that probably has worked better than you expected.
Birch and slate stone are two that have kind of blown my mind in their efficaciousness for a wide variety of different types of talismans and amulets. They've worked with, stuff from the Greek magical papyri. They've worked with stuff from the Key of Solomon. They've worked with things from the Galdrebach. I have tried a number of different traditional talismans on them, and I've been surprised almost each and every time with birch and with slate stone.
It doesn't totally surprise me. Slate stone sort of holds energy well.
Yeah.
And doesn't sort of not too opinionated of a stone.
Well, and slate is also, if you look at how it's formulated through, time, it actually goes through a process of all four elements. So it's a balanced creation of all four elemental forces, which for a lot of these things, you're either calling upon the four demon kings of the earth, or you're calling upon the four main archangels of the cardinal directions. So if you've got the full-on balance of those energies already, it's very readily ready to receive those energies from all four directions, right?
Right. Well, let's take a segue, because visually speaking, people can hear us talking about it. But let me share my screen a little bit, so actually people can see some of these CNC-based machine creations, which are pretty cool. This, if you're listening to radio, well, this particular today, well, guess what? You get more if you were
live.
if you're live. So we'll try to do our best to describe some of these. This was one of the ones.
So this is a solar talisman from the Greater Key of Solomon. And this one is for creating empires and growing dignities. And it's made on actually a gold-plated metal, is how I was able to do it in a much more affordable way for people, rather than doing it out of, solid 24 karat gold type thing.
Right. That one's too small, but there's a bigger picture of that.
There's a bigger picture.
And so
that's a ritual, obviously, using one of the slates.
Yeah, so this is a slate with the four seals of the four cardinal archangels from the Grimoire of Armadale. And then with our candles, what we've done is we've found a way to actually create labels for the candles that are printed and consecrated and made in the proper days, times, and hours. And then we adhere those to wax, and then I put them through a consecration ritual on the proper day, time, and hour once they're put together. So if you look into old types of hoodoo and conjure, you'll see that they use the Solomonic Pentacles quite often with candle spells. And so I wanted to, kind of chaos magic my way into how I was doing that. And it worked out remarkably well, actually.
There's another type of spell, somewhat Jupiterian.
Yeah, so same thing here. This is, I believe, the first pentacle of Jupiter, which if you look at its description in the Key of Solomon, you'll see that it opens up to all of the powers of Jupiter. And so you would conjure Archangel Sakiel here, and then you put a candle in the middle for Sakiel. And then obviously the Hebrew names on the outside are the names of the four ruling archangels of Jupiter that rule under Sakiel. So you're basically conjuring the five main angels of the Jupiterian realm here. And so you can do pretty well any type of Jupiter work with a setup like this.
And I mean, that's, this is for the people listening, this is basically a laser engraved. It's on a slate with four candles, a fifth 7-day candle. Very clean slate stone.
Yep.
This one is clearly a demonic seal with an N.
Yeah, and so then, there's another, topic of contention. Are ends efficacious? Are they not? One thing that I have found is that when we do put the ends on them, the energetic signature does change. We have actually had multiple people test it, and the energetic signature of the actual altar tile does seem to change, and the energy comes through a little bit hotter. Not necessarily better in any way, but it's definitely a hotter feeling. So I don't know if we can attribute that to the thousands of people around the world that are using the ends now, and maybe there's an egregore built behind them, or if perhaps these are actually truly demonic tongue that have come through. We don't actually really know. The only one that can really answer that is Stephanie Connolly. But, you know, as far
she'll be on the show next week.
That you will.
So, what I can say is that it does change how the energy comes through on these.
She's not the only one. This actually, a lot of the ends originally comes from her teacher, DuCont, which is still controversial, but yeah, she just collected them all as the first person who kind of collected them all. But this is a great looking like seal too. Like here we have another kind of, this is another interesting triangle.
Yeah, so this is actually a conjuring triangle from my course, The Devil's Witchcraft. And so if you look at it, for those of you on radio that aren't seeing this, it's basically I've taken a witch's 3-ring compass or circle. That's your outside. Then I've got a triangle of art in the middle of that. And then within it is a square. If you look at the basic design of it, you'll see that it's actually the Philosopher's Stone. And then with that, I've got the 3 secret names of Hecate that is seen throughout the PGM or the Greek magical papyri for a number of Hecatean conjurations. Then on the triangle where you would normally see the name of Archangel Michael in ceremonial magic, I have the words that are most associated with Typhon Set. And then within that, I've got the 3 seals of the Infernal Princes or the 3 Grand Chiefs of the Grimoire Verum. So that most people that work that system know that they rule over the world in Africa and in Europe and Asia and in the Americas. And then in the center of that, in the square, I've got the names of the 4 cardinal demon kings, Egan, Paimon, Orines, and Amaimon. And so then within that, you can actually use this for charging your own talismans. You can use this with a similar method to Trithemius's method for conjuring spirits into crystals. Works quite well with this setup, actually. And then you can also use this, of course, for your evocations and conjurations, whether you want that to be in a crystal, in a black mirror, or in your incense smoke or whatever. So it's actually a very versatile seal. And I've tried making it on other surfaces, and none of them have worked quite as well as the slate.
Slate worked the best.
Slate works.
This one's a little too small. This is
here's another conjure candle that is made with an image that one of actually the art team for Arundel Overman did this. This is from his illustrated Grimoire Verum, I believe. And then what we've done is we've taken the seals and everything, and we've turned these into conjure candles for doing basic spell work. Because one thing that I have found is, and the ceremonial magicians would argue it, that, unless you get full visual manifestation, you're not going to get the results from these demons. But what we have found is that using a conjure method with the demons, calling them with a actual invocation, and then giving offerings like you would with a normal novena has actually been rather efficacious. So it was a idea that Arundel came up with, and we ran with it, and it's been, we have hundreds of 5-star reviews on them. So
I would agree with that general token.
And
again, some of the very people who said that you had to have full visual manifestation later said that they were full. They recanted, like Joseph, I forgot his name, I think Peterson or whatever, basically later recanted that they didn't really get the kind of things they were saying. So that's kind of one of those notions from ceremonial magic that people say a lot, but in practice, a simple novena will get you a pretty long way with some offering, even with most Goetic spirits at least, and the Grimoire Verum spirits.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you're working with them in a, respectful manner, you're giving offerings, you're building up a relationship with them, and you're working with them like you would with any other local spirit or whatever, you're probably going to start seeing results. And, it's kind of like I said with the buddy that you go out for a beer with every week versus the buddy you only see every 5 years. Your mileage will vary. It will, for sure. If you're a brand new occultist and, you just light up the candle and you're like, Boone, I really, really want $100,000 this year, and I want a new raise, and I want a new job, and
it's
what?
Funny. Why is this the one? It's funny because you'd be like,
it's funny, but
because everyone mentions him first, almost always. Like all the stories seem to start with Boone.
It's always Boone or Clonic, right? Like it's like no other spirits exist in the Verum or the Lesser Key. That's, we have to use those two right off the bat. But now
it does seem that way.
It does.
For sure. And now all of a sudden, if you've taken and you've given offerings to Boone and you've lit a candle for him every day for a month, and then you're like, hey, dude, I need $100 to take my girlfriend out for dinner. I'm a little bit short this month. You mind helping me out a little bit? Boom. All of a sudden you get a $100 check in the mail from a GST return or something. It really is that simple. And it can be that simple.
And I think that's sort of like, I mean, I'm 100% would agree with almost everything you're saying here. I think that's one of the things people don't want to say, right? Like because they would have to admit, at least partially, like, some of us in the 80s who were saying this kind of stuff were right. And then secondly of all that, like, it comes to a point where you said, well, why did I spend 500 hours on this talisman when I could have just, did some novena candles for like a half hour, every day and kind of maybe just did mantra work, the end work for a half hour, got pretty good results after, a few weeks.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, add some Tibetan Buddhist mantra tech in with your ends and you might be really surprised with how good your results are, right?
Ends work really well with Tibetan mantra techniques. Actually,
they do.
They really do. Like, especially if you're really good at Qigong and you can really get your body energy. I mean, it doesn't take a lot to get the demons to show up with an N with Tibetan or, Qigong type techniques of mantra work, or classical Hindu mantra work techniques. Like when you start actually combining the text, they all of a sudden get results pretty fast. Even calling angels could be the same. To say the same thing. If you can use the angelic name as a mantra, like you'll start seeing it gets different results than what people would expect. Like,
for sure. Or even if you want, like, let's say you want to work with the Shem HaMephorash, pull out the Psalms in Hebrew, use the Hebrew words, and use that as your mantra, and you will be amazed at the results that you will get within minutes.
Yeah. For all intents and purposes, for most people who don't know Hebrew, that's going to be barbarous tongue already. So your mind is going to just get confused almost instantly. Like, what are you doing? I don't get it. And then if you know anything about linking your body into it, it's there. You'll get there fast. That's been my experience too with the Shem Force. Like, you get there fast. Now, one of the things we didn't cover is like how we talked about the slate. Now we know that slate stone's the way to go.
It is the way.
But how did your name at Azariel Flame come about?
That was actually in an initiation that I went through with a local family-based coven. The hereditary line, whether I want to believe that or not, is still up in the air. But, I went and did this initiation with them. I had trained with them for about 5 years, and it was supposed to be my priesthood initiation. And I actually got buried alive, was part of the initiation. And so it was a very shamanic type initiation. And when I was in my tomb and I was, in utter darkness and pure silence. And, basically the only thing that was missing was the mushrooms with a heroic dose. It would have been a little bit crazier, but, it was very, very interesting.
Wait a minute. You're in Alberta.
Yeah.
I think can't you just get them? Like,
well, that's neither here or there, but but for this particular initiation, no, we did not use entheogens. And I was in this tomb for 24 hours. And, basically during that time, you lose all perspective of time, space, everything. And I mean, you're completely sensory deprived for 24 hours, basically, right? So what ended up happening was I astral projected out of my body and did, probably the last 12 hours out of my body. And during that time, what happened was I had, whether you want to call it an epiphany with my holy guardian angel or a meeting with my holy daemon, or maybe I just, had a psychotic break, who knows? But basically what ended up happening was I met up with these spirits and they started, giving me attunements and removing past life baggage and things like that. And what ended up happening was they said, now going forward, we're going to give you a new name. And Azariel was the name that they gave me. And they said, your role in this tradition is going to be the keeper of the mystic flame. And so they said, so we're going to call you Azariel Flame. And I had not planned for this. This was not a thing at all that was on my radar. I wasn't going to change my name for the magical community or anything. I actually thought having a magical name was pretty fucking hokey at one point. But then when I came out and I, had a few days to let that integrate, I started, doing the gematria and the numerology and everything else on it and really looking into it. And Azariel Flame actually lines up perfectly with my life path number of 1, if you're into numerology. And it completely matches all of my astrological data and it completely fits me 100%. So I took that, there's one coincidence. Okay, maybe I am projecting this. 2 coincidences. It's probably still me being a little bit psycho.
But at 3,
when you get up to
that's
3 or 6, it's like, okay, all right, I'll just, take your advice. We'll just go with this. And, that's kind of how the world has known me at large since.
But it's kind of interesting because that's a very similar theme in a lot of initiations, is this 24 plus hour level of isolation and darkness, that can create that. So, well, you might not believe or know whether or not they're hereditary or not. They did use at least techniques that sound pretty realistic to me. For a life birth reverse.
If you look into a number of different shamanic cultures, being buried alive or going on a vision quest while fasted or things like that are very pervasive in a number of cultures around the world. So, yes. I mean, they did use real tech. It got real results. I definitely did get an initiation. Like it's, when I walked out of there, I was not the same person. Like there was a night and day difference. Which for anyone out there who is getting initiations, if you don't feel a difference after, even if you're getting a Reiki initiation,
well, wait, see, we're gonna pick on that. We're gonna pick on that, right? Because our Reiki program takes you 2 years to get through. Because fuck it, we don't do weekend initiations. Like you're either gonna learn it the right way that Yusui taught it in Japan, or we don't teach it.
Exactly.
So we're a little persnickety about the Reiki because we're like, people will be like, well, why does your program take 2 years instead of a weekend? Because you have to learn how to do energy work.
Yeah.
And people's lives change after the first attunement. A lot.
Oh, it's massive. If you actually do it the way that Mikhail set out for us to do it, it's a massive undertaking and shift. People get, attunement sickness for months afterwards if they weren't properly prepared.
Well, exactly. Like, yeah, like we have people in our program now that were like, yeah, you're not ready yet. You're like, you still have to learn some basics. You still have to get the energy work down, so you don't get sick for months. That was just what we told them, and they're like, come on, it's a Reiki attunement. We're not going to get sick for months. We're like, oh yeah.
If it's
here's
done
some
properly.
qigong. Here's some qigong for you just to test this theory out.
So yeah, that's totally it. But any initiation, really any powerful ritual that you attend, really any powerful ritual can get you sick for weeks. Like,
Oh,
if the
absolutely.
people know what it means, if they know what they're doing, and you don't, that's not to say not to do that. Go get sick for a couple weeks so you get those spiritual development.
Well, and your energy body will catch up to that after. But I mean, if you're not prepared for it, it will definitely make you sick. And that's something that a lot of people don't talk about in the occult circles. Is, you know, something that, you know, I stole the term from Magic the Gathering because I'm a nerd, but summoning sickness. People that start doing channelings or actually, you know, fully embodying gods and things like that, they can get sick for months afterwards.
I have a real good theory of why people don't talk about this. If you want to hear it,
I would love to hear it.
Because people aren't doing it. Like, the couple people who are actually doing it, and actually do real magic, are in the vast majority online. Like, so like to have the submarine sickness, they would, after the first time, they would probably already know that something real happened. But that's not what 99% of the people who probably read books, they don't necessarily actually do the summoning, right? And that's why no one talks about it, because it's just, yeah, we're talking about it because clearly we've had shared experiences where we've gotten sick for a couple weeks, you know, and it clears out and you're okay, you know. But I don't think that's common. I think that's common because we're doing magic, but not common for people who don't. Like,
there's a lot of librarians out there, and there's not a lot of occultists. That's, you know, how I often put it.
Said here on Queen City.
Live radio once again. Live radio. I actually call them lifestyle accessories versus actually magicians or actual witches
or magicians.
I just say it's a lifestyle accessory. It's a popular lifestyle accessory right now.
Well, and I'm sure you guys see it all the time, especially being over there in Ontario. You know, it seems to me like every Becky or Karen that's on a weekend retreat out there is, you know, they're a Reiki master now, and they're doing online attunements, and they're, you know, they have hundreds of clients and whatever. And, you know, those clients go and they're like, I don't know if I got anything out of that session, or, you know, I have Reiki level 3, but I don't feel any energy. And it's like, I don't think you have Reiki level 3. Like, I really don't think that you have it.
It's very interesting because my wife happens to be named Becky. But when she got her first attunement, she's like, it was like a triple. Just it was barely anything. And then we redid her attunements, and she's like, wow, that was such a difference. And I mean, that's not to say that I mean, Reiki is kind of an easy one to pick on because there's always these, but there's as many people doing angel attunements that are screwing around with that there is with Reiki, as far as like, here's your half-hour attunement to become fully an angelic master. I'm certainly seeing that. Reiki is an easy one because everyone's doing it. Kind of like to say that, you know, first of all, Reiki is an actual path based around esoteric Buddhism, which actually is brutal. And Reiki is in itself pretty transgressive if you're actually doing it right, because you have to confront all these like issues up front, but no one wants to say that, you know. And you're right, it kind of comes across as like, here's your weekend pass. But then there's so much of the occultism that we could say it's similar, right? Like, here's your weekend pass, your pre-scripted experience, that you leave the experience and nothing has changed. Like, you're not changed. There's nothing that's happened, nothing that's different. It was fun. It was like a play, you know, maybe like a bad play for most rituals, right? Or a lot of rituals, and that's it. You go home. It's pretty safe.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm sure you have seen that a lot, especially being that you're initiated into voodoo and all of that. I mean, when you're at a ceremony like that and somebody gets ridden, that's real. There is no hiding the fact that is actually happening. Whereas, you know, there's
It's
other.
damn scary too. It's
Exactly.
not damn scary. I love it. I mean, that's why I got initiated to voodoo, right? I personally really love it. Like, it's awesome. But if you've never seen it before, and there's an Agoon with a freaking knife in his literally 6 inches into his rib cage, you're like, what the hell is going on here, right? Like, you know, or you know, if you come out now at our store, we do private invite only voodoo rituals. But if you're here at a ritual at the store and we're doing a possession ritual for Fat Gay Day and the Barons, and you see me get possessed by the Baron and drink half a bottle of Pinman, which is 21 head pepper rim, that even the smell makes you cough from it's so spicy. And you're like, how the hell did they drink all that? You're like, yeah, this is not really easily faked. Like, it's, you know.
Or
it's
them
not
saying
easy
things.
To fake.
Right, or them, like, the law saying things that shouldn't even be known, that you only know. So having
Out
even
loud.
that foresight outside on the out loud, you're like, yeah, this ain't Kansas no more. This is real stuff.
But it's interesting if you carry that through, like, you can get similar results from the Norse spirits and the Hindu spirits and a lot of different spirits when you go that far. But then again, when you go that far, like, there's always risks. It's not the Hollywood risks or what people think. It's just the real risk is that you're the stasis of the safe kind of, I don't know, fake magic kind of goes away. You just can't assume that everything's going to stay the same then.
Well, and then the other thing too is you always have the people going, you know, is magic safe? Is this actually like a safe thing? Well, it's as safe as anything. No. You can get hit walking across the street. You can get in a car accident every time you get in your car. That doesn't mean that it's going to happen every time you do it. But sometimes, you know, when that spirit comes through and it wants to ride your bones because it has a message for everyone in the group,
you need to let it happen. Yeah, it might be truly a little bit of aftercare. But I mean, that said, is martial arts safe? No, right? People, you can get hurt. Can you get hurt in a basketball game? Yeah. Like, all these things that are participatory have some risk, but I generally think that the risks of the occult, the risks of magic and the occult are way overblown. And I think I'll just say it, there's probably political reasons. You know, not just politics, but I mean occult politics. You know, the fear sells probably more books. You know, a lot of that kind of stuff. Like, it sells a lot more books that if you actually practiced it, it would probably not do that. So, I mean, I hate that so many people say that magic is so dangerous. It's even to the point to talk about technomancy. The chat PGT algorithm refuses to give you answers about anything occult because the algorithm says that's a dangerous topic. Again, so that you bringing it out is, we're talking about a lot of technomancy today, but you bringing it out is kind of here's this cultural idea that this is totally dangerous and why. Like, now, first, I think, you know, there's a lot of other culture that themselves feel like this is dangerous, but I think that those people are misguided, actually. I think the miracles that you can achieve through engaging with occult practices are phenomenal. Like, you can actually change your life. I'm sure you'd agree. You've seen your clients come to you. They come to the Alberta store and their lives get changed.
Oh, absolutely. And I love actually that you just brought up martial arts, because that's one of my favorite ways of relating it to people. Because you get people that come and they're like, I tried this spell that you told me to do and nothing fucking happened. And I'm like, okay, so did you try it again? Did you tweak what you did last time? Did you try changing the way that you pronounce the barbarous words? Did you get yourself into a better mindset when you did it? Did you actually try and make connection with that spirit when you did it? And people have this weird thing with the occult that they think that they're going to do this the first time. It's going to give them unbelievable miracle-like results because it's thaumaturgy, it has to, but they wouldn't approach anything else that way. They would never, ever walk into a jujitsu class and be like, I can kick the shit out of all of you here because I watched UFC last week.
Yeah, they wouldn't do that they wouldn't do that with learning a language. They wouldn't do that with piano or learning an instrument. They wouldn't do that with art. But yet, actually, I think this is a product of what we were initially talking about too. This goes back to the product of the talismans and the notion that, yeah, if you make it exactly correct, it's going to work. I've never actually seen that happen. Like, it'll work, but not exactly the way you expect. It's like people don't understand that all of this is a process that acts upon you and you're acting upon it. It's not you can't hate the miracle. You can't hate the process and expect the miracle.
Well, I think this goes back to your Hollywood perspective of magic. It should be poof, there it is, and we never have to worry about this ever again. And that's definitely been something in the more like cultural media.
Absolutely. And just because you have magicked one situation doesn't mean that your entire life isn't going to change to match that situation. And now there's new things that might need addressed, right?
Right. And in fact, if the magic worked, if you change one situation, it should ripple and change the dominoes of all situations in different ways. Exactly. Like if you get a new job, it could possibly change your friend network. And not only that, it could change your relationship with your significant other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, for better or worse, right? All these things could change. It could change your health too. All these can change right with just a new job, and that's one spell.
Exactly. And that's the other extreme of it too, is then some people do go out and they do that one spell and they miraculously change their life. And then all of those dominoes start to fall. And they're like, what did I do wrong? And it's like, no, you didn't fucking do anything wrong. You got your result, and this is the result of that result.
Or it's necessary components of the result. Like, you cannot get the result without all these things.
Exactly.
It's sort of like everyone wants a magical pill to change everything in their life without embracing the process of change itself. Like, so let's change this, but not have anything else change, versus the idea that embracing the process is what is kind of the important thing that leads to the result. It's an attachment to situations that are probably already not the best, and when you actually go and change something in a different thing, it has to change those situations that already should change. Like, because the vibration, your whole vibration is changing across all the spectrums, all the systems.
Absolutely.
Well, how the time flies. It's already 7 o'clock. So, Azariel, do you have anything going on in Alberta that you'd like our listeners to know about?
Well, we've just moved to a new location. So if you are here in central Alberta, come and check us out. We're now out in the country, away from the hubbub of people. And we're going to be starting to do classes in person here. We're going to be doing Reiki classes. I'm going to be doing treatments and stuff here again. So there'll be lots of new, exciting things here. We'll probably be a destination for people on weekends. So if you are in this area, come and check us out. If you're not in this area, check us out anyway, because we have an online store where we sell all of the stuff that I make and that we talked about at the beginning of the show. And I have a course coming up that's starting on January 25th. If you're interested in traditional witchcraft with a little bit of sorcery from late antiquity mixed in, it's called The Devil's Witchcraft, and we'll look at a whole bunch of mythologies and stuff for working with different devilish figures for your sorceress practice. And other than that, that's pretty much all I got on the go for this month, because, I'm taking a little bit of a break because we just had the busiest season of our life moving the store out here. So
moving is never going to be easy. Never.
It is not. No.
So stay on for a few minutes. Now, Zach, what do we have going on in Toronto at Queen City?
Well, at Queen City, we have your Tarot Workshop series continuing tomorrow. We also have our Luck Buddha series continuing tomorrow for the month of January. So that's what we got coming up. And
And on the
furthermore,
27th of January, if you're any level sponsor, we're doing an in-person Massive Chaos Baphomet, and it will probably be a possession ritual.
Hell yeah!
You know, I met Zach at a Massive Chaos Baphomet.
That we did.
We met my wife at a Massive Chaos Baphomet.
Nice.
So after that, we are starting our basic witchcraft classes. So we're going to have more basic stuff for a while. So you'll be able to, if you're a sponsor, you kind of come to all the classes. We can pay for them a la carte. Stuff like pendulums, tarot. Again, less advanced tarot. A whole bunch of herb classes because everyone who's a sponsor has been begging us for herb classes all the time. So we're going to teach herb magic classes, not just Western herb magic classes either. Chinese medical and Taoist magical herb classes will be on the forefront too. And since we're going to have her on the show next week, and she's going to make a guest appearance July 1st, we're going to start summoning in every 2 weeks all 72 demons of the Goetia and go through them one by one with anyone who's a chin sponsor, of which Stephanie is going to help us kick off that actual series. She just went through all 72 demons on daemonology.org, and she's going to come and help us go through all set, not at one day. We're going to do it every 2 weeks.
That would be a bit much. 1 day, 72. I mean, maybe in the future, but not anytime soon.
You know, either that would be probably the most garbage ritual ever, or like it would take 3 days and it would be, I don't know. You'd need Adderall to finish that ritual. You'd need Adderall. But we're going to do all 72, one demon per 2 weeks. So there's a little bit of studying. It's going to be like a full, here's the workshop, and actually do an actual in-person summoning. And, after the show, I'll probably talk to, Azariel and see if we can get some little slate demons for everyone who's participating in that, to carry that, So we're going to see what we could do. Maybe negotiate it a little. Maybe not tonight, but soon, And so basically, if you're in Toronto, there'll be witchcraft classes and kind of stuff classes. What do you call almost every week? Obviously, we kind of talked about Reiki a lot. Like if you want to be part of our Reiki program, we do a 2-year apprenticeship Reiki program, which is a little bit different. If you're interested, reach out to us. We could talk about it. We do interviews. Your money's not actually good enough to get in the program by itself. You have to actually interview. And then we have a conversation about whether it's right. And then we'll work on the money aspects of it. Like the money's secondary. Like there's volunteer opportunities. There's other stuff to make it work, but it's much more of an apprenticeship program. So you have to interview like you do for an apprenticeship. And then we'll work out the money stuff later as a secondary concern.
Yes.
So just the way I think Usui did it. More like that. And the last thing, obviously, is, as it turns out, like Zach mentioned, the Buddhist ritual that was kind of off the hook for the Luck Buddha ritual, but the Golden Mountain Sangha has got basically some sort of Buddhist or Hindu ritual scheduled sort of from now through the whole year. So if you want to do Buddhist rituals with a few people who actually know Buddhism and sort of know kind of sorcerous levels of Hinduism and actual Taoist possession rituals, this Golden Mountain Saga here is kind of doing a whole bunch of that. So if you're interested in that stuff, come by 607 Gerrard Street, 4th floor. We got the whole thing. You can't miss us. Just come here. And that said, with that, things getting a little kind of weird again with COVID. So, stay healthy, stay well, and we'll see everyone next week with who got mentioned?
Stephanie Connolly.
Correct.